shop for summer clothes. Think pink, pink, pink if you want that kelp that shows. Red is dead, blue is through, green's obscene, brown's taboo, and there is not the slightest excuse for plum abuse or chartreuse.
Welcome, gorgeous. I am really pleased to say welcome to my weekly video blog, what they commonly call a vlog. So I'm giving you musings from my egg chair. I thought I might start sharing some weekly updates on the sorts of things that I talk to clients about. So this week I've been talking a lot about relationships and friendships and how different relationships have different levels. In particular, I've come up with this idea about transactional versus peripheral relationships and why it's important that for, good sort of sense of connection and well-being that you actually have both. Let me define them first. Peripheral relationships are those people that you know because you actually share a common interest. There's the things that you really enjoy doing and you enjoy getting out and meeting people who enjoy doing the same things. They're not always people that you're going to form firm, fast friendships with. However, they may be people that at some point people might move from your peripheral relationship space into a more transactional relationship space. And that transactional relationship space is actually where most of your closer friends sit. I call them transactional relationships because they're really about you give to somebody else and you expect them to give in return. So it's an emotional kind of tit for tat. You do keep score when you engage with other people. Despite the fact that we like to think we give a lot of ourselves and don't expect anything in return, what usually happens is if you don't get anything in return, you kind of quickly decide that that relationship's not really doing anything for you. So what's the difference and why are they both important, and where do our intimate relationships sit? So I've kind of got this hierarchy idea. Imagine a bell curve. At one point I actually said, can you imagine a breast? You know, the lovely curve of the breast. If you imagine the top where your nipple actually sits, that's actually where the family sits. They're part of your transactional intimate relationships, except that you usually find that with families you often end up giving more than you necessarily get in return. And at different times in your life you might give more and then other people might, give back at a different point in time, but it's not quite as transactional directly as you feel in other relationships because you feel a sense of obligation to those people. So they're in that transactional space, but they really are the pimple on the pumpkin. They're the bit on the top. However, some people with their families actually move their family down into more of an intimate relationship or transactional friendship relationship space. When you move them down to that point, they're the times when, if you're not getting much back from your family, you just stop really having much interaction with them. When you think about intimate transactional relationships, we're talking about our partners. We often give, but we expect to get stuff in return. When we give a lot and we don't get much in return, we find ourselves very dissatisfied in the relationship and we wonder, why are we here and do we still want to be here? Because if you go down to the next layer of the hierarchy, when you have transactional relationships that are just friendships, you give. If you don't get a lot back, you usually decide that you don't need that friend anymore. You feel like you're giving more than you're getting in return. So transactional, obviously, because give something, get something back. Peripheral, because you're really only there because of a shared interest. What's interesting is that for some people, most of their relationships are transactional, and then when they lose those people out of their lives, it's absolutely devastating, and they don't really know who they are without having those people in their lives. In comparison, if you have all of your friendships as peripheral relationships, you really don't feel like there's anybody there for you. You have a lot of shared common interests and you can spend time with those people in your life, but in reality, they don't actually give you a whole lot of emotional support. So what's the best mix? The best mix is actually to have both. And if you don't have any peripheral relationships in your life right now, that's why you tend to fear when transactional relationships go, or start to come under threat. So for those of you coming out of relationships that are intimate relationships, you've either just come out of, a long-term relationship, you may be looking at divorce if you were ever married, or separation. Those transactional relationships, if you've been very heavily invested in them to the point that you have very few other transactional relationships apart from family in your life, and for those of you who might be disconnected from family, you don't even feel that you have that network of support, you feel completely alone, isolated and unsupported. Okay, what I would encourage you to do if that's you is to go and reconnect to some people in peripheral space. Stop and imagine the things that you really loved to do when you were young. Go back, actually find classes in cooking or some social groups that you can actually engage in. Stop making it just about, your children or your friend, your family and those other sort of broader connections. And if you stop and think about your work colleagues sit in that peripheral space. Very rare that you have good, close transactional relationships in a work environment. Okay, so that's my tidbit for this week. I hope that was really useful to you. Please, please, please stay tuned, like the page, because I'm going to put these up every week. Just a little tidbit to give you a bit of an insight into how I think, how I encourage you to think, and hopefully I'm going to see you soon.
Pink for cheeks and pink at your lips, pink for shirts and all of your slips, just a touch of pink at your knees, and if you please, what? Pink chemise.